Welcome back, everybody. As a neutral chair, obviously I look forward to each session equally, but then to misquote Orwell, perhaps some sessions are more equal than others, and I've been particularly looking forward to this session. Last year we ran a really interesting session where we found out how different universities and training providers were preparing for the SQE, and we're going to do the same again this year. Last year we had 5 organisations. We've looked to top that by having 6 different organisations this year. And the way this session will work will be each panellist will do a short introduction, but the bulk of the session is going to be interactive for discussion. So please submit your questions by clicking on the link below and we'll try and feed them into the session. Now, I've given each panellist that we have 2 minutes to tell us how they're responding to the SQE. And first up, we're going to hear from Dimitrios Giannopoulos, who's inaugural chair in law and head of department of law at Goldsmiths University of London. Dimitrios is an academic bencher at the Honourable Society of the Inner Temple and a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy. Since he joined Goldsmiths in 2018, he's launched a number of LLBs, as well as creating a new Department of Law. So over to you, Dimitrios.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thanks for the invite. I'm delighted to be here. So at Goldsmiths, we have chosen to partially embed the SQE into our degree. The ambition is to provide our students with a solid foundational and practical knowledge and allow them to develop the required professional skills that will facilitate their taking the exam. We don't have the logistical capacity or ambition, on the other hand, to fully prepare our students for the exam and will direct them to other providers that will be offering compact, short-term SQE preparation programs for that purpose. Our decision to embed SQE elements is intrinsic to the distinctiveness of our program. We aim to teach students law in its social, cultural, procedural, institutional, and professional context. So our plan to integrate the SQE is threefold and is already in motion. Firstly, we teach substantive law in parallel with elements of ethics and procedure. For example, in criminal law, 2/3 of contact time is dedicated to substantive criminal law theory, let's say, and 1/3 of contact time is dedicated to the study of the criminal process, where there is excellent scope to teach SQ elements such as advising a client at the police station or on the law, procedure and processes in pre-trial proceedings. In this context, we also experiment with SQE-specific assessment methods, for example, the multiple choice questions in seminars. Secondly, we inject in relevant modules SQE-specific workshops and webinars delivered by solicitors that we're collaborating with. These solicitors are better placed than our academic staff, quite intrinsically, quite naturally, to offer close analysis of relevant procedural detail and ethics. Finally, we have designed an SQE2 module that sits in our final year of studies and which will take examples of functioning legal knowledge from across the curriculum as a backdrop against which we will teach the relevant skills. Perhaps more importantly, we create several opportunities for our students to come in contact with professional practice, including in undertaking several placements during the life of their degree, with a focus on social justice placements in relevant NGOs, legal advice centres and charities. Thank you, and very much looking forward to your questions.
Thank you ever so much, Dimitrios. And next up, we have Finn Griggs, who's representing the City Consortium, a group of leading city law firms. Finn is also a partner in the corporate and M&A department of Linklaters. She's global co-head of FinTech there and one of the firm's trainee recruitment partners and on the firm's Global People Committee. Well, Finn, it sounds like you're the busiest person in the world, so thank you for taking the time to join us today, and over to you.
Not at all. Thank you so much for having me. So, as Ben said, I'm here today representing the City Consortium, and that's a collaboration between 6 law firms, all based in the City of London. So that's Freshfields, Herbert Smith Freehills, Hogan Lovells, Linklaters, Norton Rose Fulbright and Slaughter and May. Linklaters joined the City Consortium in 2019, but the other 5 firms have been working together to deliver LPC and GDL courses with BPP since 2000. And the consortium is brought together by a mutual desire to develop the next generation of lawyers using our experience to develop the knowledge, behaviour and skills of our future trainees. The City Consortium students will learn side by side and in person when allowed, before joining their respective firms. In response to the opportunities that are presented by the revised SQE regime, the consortium undertook a wide-ranging review of the skills, the knowledge and the behaviours that we think are required of city lawyers, both now and looking ahead to the future. And that review involved stakeholders in each firm, including trainees, associates, partners, speaking to our clients, and also our learning and development, knowledge and technology and innovation specialists. The results of that consultation then form the basis of our tender process, and the outcome of that is that the City Consortium will be working with BPP going forward. In terms of what we're aiming to get out of the programme, it's best preparation to prepare to pass the SQE and best preparation for practice in our firms. We think it's vital to be investing in the next generation of lawyers to equip them with future-proofed knowledge, skills and behaviours that they will need for our practice. And providing excellent education and skills programmes is part of that strategy. The new SQE regime allowed us even more flexibility to decide what we wanted to teach, how and when. And our programme will go beyond the requirements of SQE for that purpose. So since we partnered with BPP at the end of 2019, we've been working closely with them to develop our programmes. And that includes what we've called the Plus programme, which covers the skills, knowledge and behaviours that are required for our future trainees. There's a knowledge focus within that programme, and with the flexibility that the new regime allows us, that will include commercial law topics like M&A, public companies, banking and debt finance. But it will also cover the more commercial aspects of what we do, such as business strategy, innovation and legal tech, mindset and resilience. But all round, the aim of what we're trying to achieve is just to make sure that we develop really well-rounded solicitors and that they're best placed for their future careers with us. So thank you for having me here today and looking forward to the questions.
Thanks ever so much, Finn. So next up, we're going to have Chris Howard, who's Director of Professional Legal Education at King's College London. Chris originally qualified as a solicitor with Trowers and Hamlins, specialising in construction practice. He's worked in professional legal education for the past 15 years. He taught at BPP University and then as a senior lecturer at King's College. And now he leads the newly formed Professional Law Institute, where he oversees professional and executive education. So thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the SRA for giving me the opportunity to speak today, and to all of our colleagues as well. At King's College London, we are wedded to employability as one of our key visions and outcomes for our students. And so when the SQE began to come on stream, we looked very closely at our offerings and how we could best support our students going forward into the new regulatory environment. So we've taken a number of steps. We first of all undertook a review of our LLB, and we've taken the view that we are not making substantive changes to our research-led LLB. And that's partly in recognition that our students, as with other universities, but particularly we think at King's, have a number of different career outcomes in terms of international practice, barrister practice, business, politics, research, and so on. So we've chosen not to make SQE as yet a part of our LLB, although we will keep it under review. However, we want to support our students going forward with their careers, whatever options they choose. And so we've entered into an alignment with Barbary Global, which we think offers the students a great opportunity to further their career in solicitor practice through the SQE. So our students get an exclusive discount on Barbary's SQE1 package if they want to take that after completion of their LLB or indeed LLM degree. We've undertaken a selected external review of Barbary's offering, and that's why we're confident that it's a really great package of study, either online or as a face-to-face option. And similarly, we've also worked with Barbary in terms of their New York Bar program. So their New York Bar program is taught out of our offices as well, and online, obviously. And again, our students have an exclusive discount on that program. So while we're not providing SQE, we're very proud and pleased to be working with Barbary. In terms of our further ambitions, as was mentioned in the intro, we've also, as a reaction partly to the SQE and partly to the training environment and the changes in the global environment for legal practice, created a Professional Law Institute, which I'm very proud to head up. Now, the Professional Law Institute is an embodiment of our goal to be at the cutting edge of law and practice in terms of making sure our students are equipped with the correct skill sets and knowledge sets, and looking at further opportunities going forward. So we've undertaken a number of initiatives through our Professional Law Institute. So we now have skills training for our students in areas like negotiation and accounting that they can take as extracurricular modules. We're very proud of our professional clinic, our professional law clinic. And again, that offers students the opportunity to do experiential learning alongside their degree program. We're also looking at future programs of study. So we're developing new programs in professional education. And as another initiative, we've also validated the Inns of Court College of Advocacy's new bar course to support their goal to refresh and take forward bar training. So we're working with local providers, working with stakeholders, and making sure that we offer the greatest optionality for our students. And just picking up Finn's point about future skills as a final point, one of the goals of our Professional Law Institute is to look at where we need to develop new areas of study and new expertise in future skills like legal technology, psychology, and many of the other skills that have been identified as essential for future lawyers. So one of the things we're doing as a precursor to formal release of new programs is our Future of Legal Practice series. So if you Google Future of Legal Practice at King's, you'll see opportunities to attend our annual seminars on topics that we think are informing the future development of the profession. I'm going to stop there, but thank you very much for that opportunity.
Thank you, Chris. And yeah, those seminars certainly sound very interesting. So next up, we're going to move to Gun Judge. She's head of AG Integrate at Addleshaw Goddard. Gun has been the legal chair of the Trailblazers apprenticeship program, working to help create the 3 legal apprenticeships. In a day job, as I said, she works at Addleshaw Goddard. She's currently managing their flexible resource business, AG Integrate. And previously, she's had a variety of HR roles, focusing on emerging talent as well as a range of diversity initiatives. So over to you, Gun.
Thanks, Ben. So as Ben said, I've been the chair of the Legal Trailblazers since 2014, whilst working at AG, doing various different roles. Trailblazers was the government approach to reset the apprenticeship programme in England and to encourage more diversity of roles across professional services. So with that, I worked with a number of different employers across the Trailblazer group of different law firms, corporate law firms, SMEs, to create 3 new legal standards. One was a paralegal, second was chartered legal executive, and the third was the solicitor role, which I'm here to talk to you about today, and the impact of the SQE. Fortunately for the Trailblazer Group, we worked closely with the SRA whilst we were developing the solicitor standard. So therefore, the SQE 1 and 2 are closely worked into the way the solicitor standard was set up and developed. Therefore, the impact of the change of SQE coming through will be minimal for the apprenticeship standard. So my role from today's session is to give employers and students reassurance in terms of the minimal impact that will come through. Since the launch of the solicitor standard, which was back in 2015, we've had over 545 people, students, start this programme. And the first group of those individuals will start looking to do the final part of the SQE next summer in 2021. So my role, as I've said, is to provide reassurance and also raise awareness for those employers that are looking to work with training providers to set up an apprenticeship programme. So from my perspective, the SQE won't disrupt those currently on the programmes or have an issue for those employers looking to set this up going forward. It's great to be invited to this session today to speak about how the apprenticeship programmes work and how it works for the solicitor standard. One of the early challenges that we had as a Trailblazer employer group was to ensure that the apprenticeships weren't seen as a second-class programme. And actually, the way that the SQE is developed, it actually makes my role much easier in terms of ensuring to students and employers that there is a level playing ground in terms of how the apprenticeship programme works alongside the SQE. It ensures that those on the traditional grad programme will still end up doing the exact same endpoint assessment as those on the apprenticeship route. So at my firm, AG, we've had a number of different legal apprenticeship programs come through, a mixture of paralegal and the solicitor. So we're getting ready now for how the SQE will impact our students currently studying for the solicitor program now. So from my perspective, one of the other things that we might have questions on, which I'm happy to help, is how, if you're looking to get in to set up a legal program and a solicitor program for your firm is how do you set that up given you've got 18-year-olds coming to work for the first time? What do you need to look for? How's the impact of that coming through? Now that the program's over 4 years old, there's a wealth of learning and opportunity and experience from training providers that have worked with employers to help set these programs up to allow for students to really thrive whilst doing real value-added work to businesses whilst maintaining studying as well. So hopefully I can answer questions that people have in regards to the impact of SQE on the solicitor standard. Thank you.
Thanks ever so much, Gern. And yeah, I think there's some really interesting opportunities both for firms and also students around apprenticeships. I'm sure we'll get on to that. So next up, we're going to hear from Carl Ligo. He's Vice-Chancellor and CEO at Arden University. Carl is also a Professor of Law and a barrister. Previously, he was founding VC of BPP University and was CEO of BPP Holdings. He also led the development of BPP Law School. Carl is also a founding non-executive director of the Office of Students. He's also run a range of awards, including being voted in the top 50 most influential people in UK higher education. So we're lucky to have you here, Carl, and I'm looking forward to being influenced by you. So over to you.
Well, thanks, Ben. I'm really honoured to be part of this discussion because it's a really exciting time to be involved in legal education. From LSF to LPC now to SQE is fantastic, and this is exciting opportunities. So Arden University is a pioneer in flexible online learning. We gained our university status in 2015, so we're quite a new organisation on the block. We don't carry a lot of the historical baggage of many other universities, but in that time we have over 1,000 law students studying from 85 different countries, usually online or a mixture of online and blended learning, as we call it. We approached this SQE opportunity with sort of two concepts in mind. Firstly, how do we reduce the cost to the student? And how do we make it flexible so that students can fit it in around all their other busy life commitments? So we've adopted 4 different approaches. Firstly, looking at our undergraduate law degree, we took the decision that we're going to fully integrate SQE into our undergraduate law degree. And that means not just the syllabus, but the methodology of assessments. So that will be a key part of our undergraduate law degree, and that's an option for students to be able to take. Our view is that we didn't want students having to fork out additional money for an expensive preparation course if they can do that once and for all as part of the undergraduate law degree. So that was step 1. Step 2 was to create a master's degree that does practically the same, integrates fully the SQE into the master's degree. It has the benefit that students can then access a government-backed postgraduate study loan, and if we can make it at the right kind of fee level, then a student will be able to afford both the SQE assessment fees as well as the tuition fees for that particular program. A third step, apprenticeships. Inevitably that is a step that everybody would want us to take if we're serving the legal market, so apprenticeships that fully integrate SQE. And then the final step is around something that we've labelled micro-credentials, and what we see as the future for this is a low-cost, on-demand opportunity for students to just access a bite-sized chunk of learning that's particularly relevant for what's missing out of their already knowledge base. So this could be around topics such as, conveyancing or litigation, perhaps things that haven't been covered in a traditional undergraduate degree. And our objective is to make that low cost, on demand, and if possible, some free content as well. So really to attack this idea that it's very costly, both in terms of cash and time, to be able to prepare for the SQE. So thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Carl. That's really good to hear, particularly like the sound of the free stuff. But also, I think it'll be really interesting perhaps to come to the topics of that approach to online learning and what are the sort of benefits as well as perhaps some of the limitations of that. So thank you for your patience, Elizabeth, who's our final speaker. So Elizabeth Smart is Professor and Head of Law at Sheffield Hallam University. Elizabeth is a practicing solicitor and Managing Director of Sheffield Hallam University Law Limited, which is a not-for-profit teaching law firm. Elizabeth is also a National Teaching Fellow and Principal Fellow of the Higher Education Academy. And she also advises a range of police forces and sits on the independent ethics panel of the Police and Crime Commission for South Yorkshire. So over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Ben. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. So, from our perspective, entry to the legal profession brings challenges, particularly to those from a diverse background, and particularly so in the wake of COVID. Back in 2018, we designed and created a unique law degree which was able to take advantage of the opportunities which the solicitor's qualification examination afforded and effectively mapped onto the solicitor's knowledge, competencies and skills, whilst acknowledging that it was not meant to be test prep for the SQE. The teaching methodology is a fusion of academic rigour and applied learning. It assures that our students are in a strong position, should they wish to do so, to enter the legal profession, armed with both the relevant knowledge required and the skills, confidence and ability in terms of highly skilled employment to succeed. The uniqueness of the provision centres around the design and creation of SHU Law, which is a living, breathing teaching law firm. It's not for profit and operates under an ABS licence. SHU Law provides a range of legal services for those who need it most at a time when they need it most, never more so than now. SHU Law is for everyone, not for the few. All students at all levels of their degree have the opportunity through their core modules to study in SHU Law alongside experienced, qualified professionals in a range of practice areas. The work they do can be quantified as qualifying work experience and is much more than merely repetitive and limited administrative tasks and legal transactions, and we ensure that it complies with the SRA's recently published guidance, meeting our standards for good qualifying work experience. Students in total study over 100 credits in SHU Law at levels 4, 5 and 6, and the curriculum is scaffolded to ensure tasks are level appropriate and develop a student's ability throughout their degree in a range of practice areas. Whilst we acknowledge that not all students wish to qualify in the legal profession, the degree provides exposure to a professional work environment which enhances their graduate outcomes with transferable skills, which will provide all students with a strong foundation from which to springboard successfully into the world of work. Highly skilled employment is crucial, and we believe that the experience provided across their 3 years enables this in an inclusive and equitable way. To conclude, the law provision and SHU Law are designed to break down barriers to the legal profession and ensure equality and diversity for all students from a diverse range of backgrounds, and as such is very much aligned with the aims and objectives of the SQE. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here today.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. That was great, and thank you to everyone for those introductions. I think lots to chew on there, different approaches. And I'm also delighted to observe from the panel that nominative determinism is alive and well. We've got a Finn who works in fintech, a judge working in a law firm, and a smart working in higher education. As a fisher myself, perhaps I need to consider moving jobs, but perhaps I'll wait till after the 1st of January to work out whether that's a wise move. So let's move on to the questions. We've already had a few come in, and I want to reward those who have put in questions by asking them. So keep them coming. So the first question we've got is somebody who's asked, for education providers, would you see SQE modules that you offer as optional or additional, or do you think there's something that should be studied by all? Perhaps Carl, if we come to you first, and then we'll go around the panel on that.
Yeah, of course. So my view is that it's optional. Not everybody wants to qualify as a solicitor, so we've certainly adopted an approach that it would be optional. I think then it's important to unbundle some of the modules, so you don't have to buy an entire course. So when I was at the Office for Students, we were cognizant of the Competition and Markets Authority, which was suggesting that students get locked into long, costly programs. Well, if students don't need the entire content of a test preparation program, but only segments of it, then it's right that the market should offer just segments. So I think it's from our perspective at Arden University, we look at it as optional, and students being able to buy small micro credentials that would prepare them.
Thank you, Carl. And Dimitros, do you want to say what your perspective is on this?
Yes, I mean, I would agree with Carl, first of all, that the optional element will be directly pertinent to those that want to pursue that specific career path. But on the other hand, I mean, some of the skills that go into the SQE are quite core to the legal profession more broadly. You know, irrespective of what specific career path you follow, we at Goldsmiths feel that you should have an opportunity to develop these skills. So, in a way, the SQE was the natural evolution of work that we had begun to put in place anyway, with regards to negotiation skills or advocacy skills or other skills that are very central to our profession that we embed in a way across a number of modules during the student's journey in the degree. All that culminating with a specific SQE module in year 3 that is optional for those that have decided by then to move into the solicitor profession.
That's great, Dimitros. And Chris, do you want to chip in on this?
Yeah, just to agree with what's been said already, I think optionality has got to be key. More than ever, students need to have a range of possible outcomes and to be kept as flexible as possible so that they can adapt to the ever-changing career market. So again, that's part of our reason for not sort of wedding ourselves out at the moment to SQE in terms of our LLB. And I think in terms of the general skills, as Dimitros pointed out there, certainly we see some of the particularly SQE2 skill sets as being sort of generic skills that are transferable to lots of different careers, including the law. And I guess the other point I wanted to add is that I think when it comes to SQE modules, another point to be borne in mind is that preparation for the SQE test obviously is a specialised art, and that's why we think Barbary Global are well placed and other similar providers, because they're providing training that is tooled for and worked towards the successful completion of SQE1. And so I think as well, when you think about SQE modules, there are those modules which are general preparations for skills and education that also are included within SQE. And then there are courses of study and training programs which are geared towards successful completion of the SQE and the assessment format and so on that requires.
Thanks, Chris. Elizabeth, did you want to add anything on this question?
Yes, thanks, Ben. I think all of those points are very well made. I think for me in particular, it's about providing that optionality. It's about providing that choice, but it is about recognizing that as well as developing all of those transferable skills, particularly for students from a diverse background, it's about building confidence. So even though ultimately they may decide that they don't necessarily want to go down one particular route as qualifying as a solicitor, the skills and the foundations that is building is setting them up in a really good and applicable way to really enter any profession that they would like to enter into. But for me, it's embedding those skills to ensure that the students have the confidence that they can then springboard into the world of work that is very important to us at Sheffield Hallam.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And we've had another question come in, so thank you for the person who put this one in. And I think, Finn, perhaps we'll come to you on this one. Somebody's asked, how can we avoid firms favouring law graduates over non-law graduates, even when both have the SQE?
Yes, thank you for that one. So I think that one of the benefits of SQE really is that it does equip students, both law students and non-law students, with the knowledge that they need to succeed as trainee solicitors within our firms. Excuse me. So the SQE already encompasses the compulsory subjects from a qualifying law degree. And so firms should be able to recruit in the same way as they always have, i.e. blind as to degree discipline and looking for a split between law and non-law students. it does mean giving some thought to your SQE prep course and how you're going to approach that. But in principle, it should be possible to continue things the way they have been done to date.
And do you think, Finn, it's a benefit of our current system that law firms do recruit from non-law and law graduates? Because obviously it's not the case in every country.
Yeah, I certainly do. I think that a diversity of background and degree discipline, having that sort of variation within your trainee cohort is really valuable. We know that different degree disciplines provide different expertise and different specialities within the firm, which we really value when it comes to advising our clients. So I definitely see a benefit. Clearly, we value the law degree as a discipline, but we always want to have trainees coming into our firm who have that variety of experience and that diversity among them. So I think that's something we would certainly plan to continue from our own recruitment perspective.
Thank you. Does anyone else on the panel want to come in on that question? Or, yeah, Chris, do you want to go first?
Yeah, just a quick follow-on comment, really, which is that I think it's got to be right that, particularly given the nature of the role of a lawyer is changing fundamentally. So things like technology skills, project management skills, and a whole range of other skills and knowledge bases are going to be required for practice in the future, that the non-law path is still an important route into the profession. And certainly, in terms of the knowledge base required for practice and required for SQE, our research with firms and with other recruiters has been that they will still want their non-law graduates to have a high level of legal knowledge, because although the practice is changing, equally, fundamentally, it's important, of course, to retain the confidence in black letter law and the knowledge base that's always been a hallmark of the English system. So we think that there will be strong programs emerging. I mean, some have already emerged, but more will emerge in terms of non-law degree level, master's level programs for those seeking to practice.
Carl, did you have something to add on this one? So you're on mute at the moment.
Sorry, I'm here. Sure, absolutely. So I see that there's an opportunity, and it's a difficult design structure that you've got to adapt to as a university. But there's an opportunity to concertina what was the GDL and the LPC together. So you're actually reducing the amount of cost and time for non-law graduates. So I would have thought law would be very attractive to non-law graduates now. So there'll be a bigger pool of people for the law firms to choose from. So I think that's the potential opportunity. But what we have to remember is that this test is not easy. I mean, I've had a go at those sample SQE1 questions. They're tough. It's the whole of a qualifying law degree plus the legal practice course. This is a tough test. So some preparation is needed. But I think there's a potential, if providers get it right, to actually reduce down the amount of time and cost to students.
I won't ask you what score you got on the sample questions, Carl, or maybe I will after this call. So I think talking about increasing the sort of pool of talent probably leads us on to the next question we've just had come in. And Gunn, I think this is one I'll come to you on first. Somebody's asked, do you envisage apprenticeships for non-law graduates becoming more common rather than just for school leavers?
That's actually a really timely question as we're looking to review the solicitor standard, because as I've said, it's been going now for a good 4 to 5 years. When we looked at this initially, we were quite clear with the government guidelines that you couldn't have an entry point for graduates coming on to the apprenticeship route, because they wanted to protect it from a social mobility perspective, but also to ensure that it was a protected route to qualification for students choosing to not go down the graduate pathway. Where we've got to now with part of the review is to relook at this conversation of whether or not we should allow an entry point to the solicitor standard for graduates, whether it's non-law or law. And I do think, from my perspective, that will open up a different way for students to jump onto the apprenticeship route. And obviously it's attractive for employers to do that, because levy funding now has been opened up for graduates, whereas before that hadn't been the case. Personally speaking, I have a slight concern, and this is why we need to kind of talk it through in more detail with the Institute for Apprenticeships from a social mobility perspective, because that was one of the things that we wanted to protect initially with the apprenticeship route, was to give students who didn't want to go to university, whether it was for cost reasons or they wanted to kind of make sure they could earn as they were working and learning on the job, So I think there are still some conversations for us to have. But like I said, it's a very timely conversation as we get into 2021. I am picking up with the Institute to review the standard, and that will be one of the questions that we will have to review. So bring it back to the answer, if we were then to put this in place, sorry, to the question, if we were to put kind of an option to jump on to the apprenticeship route as a graduate, I actually see it opening up not just for non-law students. I think it will open it up for law students as well, because of that caveat for employers that you would be able to draw down levy funding.
No, that's really interesting, Gunn. And I mean, I think there's probably 600 to 700 apprentices already who are the school leaver apprenticeships. I think, picking up at the point you made, there is real genuine diversity within that group. And from speaking to law firms, and I'd like to know your views, it's attracting people into the profession who would normally not have been attracted in. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, yeah, it's definitely attracting people I think that would have been put off from the studying. So again, if you think of the components to qualify in the traditional route, you were doing your degree, then potentially the GDL, then the LPC. And for a lot of students, that was just cost. Whereas with the apprenticeship programme, you are on the same route. The SQE it enhances that it's the same qualification that you are doing. But for students, it's really attractive because you are learning on the job. You are building those relationships with partners, with associates, whilst you're learning the skills to become a solicitor. And also, I think for me, it's you're earning money, but you're learning skills that are valuable all the way through your program. So that does give you an advantage, I think, personally, from what we've seen as well with the traditional graduate route. So I think for me, it's a win-win doing the apprenticeship. Obviously, I'm really biased. I help create the programs, but I do think it's a real, from the Institute's perspective, it's one of their preferred standards, because it's a real honour to say that you could leave school at 18, do this program and qualify as a solicitor without having to go to university, without having that cost of going to university. So I think I'm obviously biased, but I think it's a brilliant program.
Yeah, well, perhaps we should go to some other either biased or non-biased voices. Anyone else on the panel want to share any views on apprenticeships and sort of how they think the SQE interacts with that? I'm seeing no takers at the moment, so I'm going to move on to my next question. And one thing we have already mentioned quite a bit already in a sort of post-COVID world. I was going to say post-COVID world, if only. But obviously that's changed how universities and training providers have had to provide learning. Is that going to see a shift in how students expect to be taught, and how important is sort of technology and online learning going to be in the long term for things like the SQE? Carl, perhaps I'll come to you first, because obviously you're very much in this space.
Yeah, we're a pioneer of online learning, and we've got some amazing people here who've been working with this pedagogy for some time. And what we've noticed is that obviously it gives you a whole array of data to be able to support students, and you can be much more flexible in your approaches, and you can deliver at a lower cost as well. Although if you are going to invest in this, it's not cheap, and you have to do the pedagogy completely as a digital first pedagogy. So there's real opportunities. I think what surprised me from the pilot, though, is the fact that there are certain students that have not done as well in the pilot testing. So is there some inherent unfairness? And this was referred to in the earlier part of the conference. 80% of my students identify from a BA&ME kind of background, and 92% of my students are from high areas of social deprivation. So we come to this as a university law school that needs to step up to the plate and do something to change those stats for the SRA, because it's just not acceptable. And our online learning approach, I think, is flexible enough to be able to deliver for everyone, and to ensure that the methodology, the assessment methodology, and it's a tough one. As I said, I took the test, it's not easy. And also subject areas are not compartmentalized in the test, it's mixed, and that makes it really difficult. So you've got to have a whole approach in your organization to dealing with SQE. And I think the online pedagogy enables us to do that.
Thank you, Carl, and yeah, a really good point on the diversity point. Chris, you had something perhaps to say on the sort of tech online learning side of things.
Yeah, I mean, obviously every academic provider in the current situation has had to adapt to online learning. We're very fortunate that at King's, our King's Online team had supported the creation of online programs some years before this current crisis began. So we have several online LLM programs, and we're looking at expanding our online offering as well. And I think it's got to be the case that it's going to become part of the student experience in future years. I hope that we can continue to maintain a really good blend of face-to-face learning on campus with our online provision. But I think in terms of the SQE, online learning obviously can be a fundamental support for that. And that's again why we're partnering with Barbary, who we think have really excelled in their preparation for their SQE program in terms of how they use online learning. And as Carl said, I think getting the pedagogy absolutely right is essential when using these tools. It's not a like-for-like adaptation of face-to-face study.
Thanks, Chris. And perhaps, Finn, I could come to you, because we considered very carefully and were very deliberate in not having tech as something that was part of the SQE, partly actually because by the time we'd developed and gone through all the process of developing that, 3 years later, we then might be testing something that's entirely out of date. But a number of people, including you, Finn, mentioned that you are including tech in your training. How important is that, and how are you approaching that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think that in general terms, COVID has obviously changed the way in which we operate as a law firm. But before that, technology was still an important part of how we looked at delivering training to our people and to our future joiners. And when we were going through that rigorous selection process I mentioned earlier as a city consortium to choose the provider, the use of technology within the course was a key consideration for us. We advise our clients on the use of technology. We use it ourselves in the firm. So it's important to start that at an early stage if we can, to really embed the way in which we deliver training. And I think we expect that focus on technology and online learning to continue. And as many people will be aware, that the learning for a lawyer doesn't stop at qualification. It will continue throughout the entire career. And we've needed to work around the current situation we find ourselves in to make sure we still give our people access to that training and they're still able to develop their skills and their knowledge. So I certainly see it as something that will continue. I don't think, as has been mentioned, it's not a wholesale substitute for face-to-face learning and engagement at the appropriate time, but it's something that we can use in collaboration with those methods, and it's a really helpful way to make sure we do deliver that training. So it will remain an important part of our SQE course as well.
Thank you. And Dimitros, how does it look from your perspective?
I couldn't agree more. A reliance on online technologies is going to be indispensable to law schools, particularly for research-led institutions, because the fundamental challenge there is to create time and space. I mean, how are you going to be able to accommodate both a significant focus on theory that has been your bread and butter, since the beginning of time, and at the same time embed appropriate focus on procedural, institutional, ethical issues that are central to the SQE. By definition, you're not going to be able to cover everything on a face-to-face environment. There's so much that you can do in that space and time. So being able to inject, to deploy webinars, contacts with legal professionals in this online environment will be of fundamental importance. At the same time, skills are very central to the SQE, so these you will have to embed in most scenario on campus, in face-to-face activities, again, giving your students access to legal professionals, taking them to study visits, introducing them to legal institutions. So I think it can be a very diverse type of activity, not just a single-dimensional learning in classroom. You need to take your students, you need to create opportunities for them to engage with legal practice.
Thank you, Dimitros. We've had another question come in, and again, this is probably for Finn, and others can come in on the back of it. But somebody's asked, do you think recruitment cycles will change as we shift from the LPC to the SQE?
So I think the honest answer here is that there's probably still work ongoing to think about how the transition will take place from the current system into the SQE system. We know that the SRA and Kaplan themselves will be thinking about how to make that transition and have the assessment centres in place for candidates. And we look forward to inputting on their thinking around some of that. From the City Consortium perspective, each firm is going to be looking at what the appropriate arrangements are for the transition from the system we have today to the system that we're moving to, and making sure that we engage with our future joiners so that they know what to expect. And that's how our recruitment will react to that. So I suspect each firm will take a different approach to how they want to manage that. And the key for us at the moment is to input into the current thinking, work closely and think about what the best way is to help that transition to take place as smoothly as possible.
I mean, presumably firms, or it's in firms' interest to try and tap into the widest pool of talent so they can get the best people coming to their firms. So I presume you want to be reasonably flexible in order to make sure you're doing that, rather than narrowing down to we want people to do the LPC or we want people to do the SQE in the transitional period, for instance.
Yeah, I think that they're all considerations that we'll take into account. So we're looking at what's the best way to make sure, as you say, we can continue to recruit the best candidates from a very diverse range of people, but also give certainty to people who are coming to join us around what they'll be doing and when.
Yeah. Could I come to you, Elizabeth? And I've got a question for you. I know Sheffield Hallam, at Sheffield Hallam, you do a lot of work to promote equality and diversity, and Carl's already mentioned some of the sort of challenges in that area. Would you like to share sort of what you do in that space a little bit, and share some good practice, perhaps?
Yes, absolutely. Many of our students do come from a diverse range of backgrounds, and particularly around online learning and methodologies, it has proved to be a challenge. Again, I can go back to my earlier point around confidence to use the technology, confidence to be able to engage within it, and also the ability, we're noticing this not only with our students, but also with our clients in SHU law, that it's not always possible for them to have access to the right bandwidth, to the laptops, to have that quiet space in the home working environment. All of the initiatives that we've been involved with in terms of trying to increase BAME recruitment and progression have always, to a certain extent, had those challenges in terms of making sure that they have got ease of access. There have been lots of exceptional hardship funds that have been put in place, across the community to try and ensure that we do that. But equally, and particularly with the clients that our students work with, what we did through lockdown was we made sure that our law firm was open for all of those vulnerable clients, students who did not or could not access that online methodology, to be able to come in and in a very socially distanced and careful way to still have the benefit of that education, learning and teaching. And just to pick up as well in terms of the online provision, it's not just for me around the teaching, it's also about making sure that our students are exposed to what the legal profession is going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years time. And it is going to be a lot more digital, it's going to be a lot more different. And so it's very, very beneficial that they can learn in this way, but also engage in providing legal advice in this way so they can map onto what the future is going to look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Unless anyone wants to build on that, I'll move on to our next question. This is, as someone who works in comms, I'm obviously biased here, but I'm interested in how people are marketing their courses. Does that change in relation to the SQE? Obviously, there has to be this clarity around what's going to count as a qualifying law degree and so on. But anyone got any thoughts on the marketing side of things? Demetrios, do you want to go first on that?
Thank you. I think it's interesting to observe the gradual change of attitudes as far as prospective students are concerned. So when this was first launched, it coincided with the launch of our Department of Law and LLB program at Goldsmiths, and so prospective students were deeply unaware at that time. They wouldn't ask questions about the SQE. I think that is already beginning to change. We now have a lot of prospective students that specifically ask about the ways in which we potentially integrate elements, and so we need to be much more forthcoming as a higher education institution, as a law school, being explicit about ways in which we are integrating elements of the SQE in our degree, and also explaining to students what our ambition is with the SQE, but also importantly, what our limitations are. Because as I explained, we don't have the ambition, we don't have the capacity to deliver the full preparation that is required. We're seeking to do that in collaboration with others. We're seeking to provide our students with a solid foundation to make sure that they're aware, they're familiar with the methodologies, and that they have the basic skill set, both in terms of knowledge, the functional legal knowledge, but also the specific skills that are integral to the assessment.
Thank you, Dimitros. Anyone else want to share what they're doing on the marketing side of things? So, Chris, I think you just beat Carl to getting your hand up first, and then I'll come to Carl. And
yeah, I'll try and be nice and brief. Simply to say that I think the key is to simplify and to be as clear as possible with students about their options. So we're working very hard to offer our prospective students and current students full information about all of the impacts of the SQE development, how it changes existing pathways, how it changes future pathways, and looking at how we can equip students with the skills and knowledge to go forward in a range of careers. So I think the key with me around marketing is clarity of message and really just helping the students navigate what will become, I think, a more complicated but also a more open situation for qualification options.
Thank you, Chris. And Carl?
Yeah, I mean, I'd support that. But this morning we heard that the transitional arrangements were changing a little bit. So you've got a little bit longer with your, I think it was a couple of weeks for you to be able to take the qualifying law degree from September of this year, from next year, sorry. So things are changing. The sands are shifting. So it's important from a marketing perspective that we understand what is going on first. I'd also say that don't think of the market, if I can call it as that, as being traditional. We have 9 different starts in a year. So we're not just looking at a September start, we also have a November start and a January start and a February start. So universities look at these things differently. And also I'm scratching my head here and saying, why wouldn't you want to do the SQE? It's got the potential for it to be less time and less expensive. It's tough, it's a rigorous test, but if you prepare yourself well, I'd have thought there's great advantage for you in trying to be an earlier adopter of it. But students need to make the choice and they need to have the full information. So I totally agree with what was said.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. And I suppose just to clarify around that date that shifted in September, that's very much in response to potential delays in A-level results in England. So it shifted it 3 weeks in order that nobody's suddenly having to accept an offer within a sort of few days of having got their results. But yeah, it's a good point. Perhaps Gun, I could come to you, and I know from some of the questions we're getting in, we've got quite a few aspiring solicitors watching this broadcast. What would your advice be to someone who's thinking that an apprenticeship might be an option for them?
I think for me, that's a really good question. I think it's worth doing your research. As always, I think there's a wealth of material of where you can go to now in terms of what are your pros and cons. On the Institute for Apprenticeships, there's a website within that clearly advertises current solicitor vacancies. I'd also be quite tenacious as a student and reach out to training providers. So you've got the likes of BPP, University of Law, City University, others that are really active in this space, and actually ask their career advisor services in terms of what works best for them, because it will suit some people's way of learning versus others. So I think there's a wealth of research and people to speak to in terms of what is right for an individual student to do. So I would utilize all of that. And also the National Apprenticeship Service is fantastic for resource, again, in terms of who is currently advertising roles, what kind of opportunities are available. Even with COVID, etc., coming through, I'm still seeing vacancies being advertised. We're not stuck to a rigid timetable, but if I was going to summarize it, I think most firms who do advertise in this space are still working to kind of that academic year, so that the September starts. But I've seen that pushed back to kind of spring for 2021 already because of the COVID impact. So just do your research.
That's really good advice, Gun. I'm looking at the clock, and we've got about 6 or 7 minutes left of the session, and I don't want to run rapidly over. So I'm going to come to one final question, and I'll go around each panelist with this one. But I suppose one thing I've found really encouraging from this conversation is introducing the SQE. A lot of it was about getting rid of a prescriptive route that sort of meant that people had to go on a certain path, and with all those problems such as having to take the LPC gamble and the risk that you get stuck without a training contract, and quite an expensive prescriptive route. And I think it's really encouraging to hear from this conversation that there is that diversity is already emerging, and we could have probably had another half a dozen people on this panel who talk about different approaches they're taking. But I wanted to come to the last question I want to ask, and I'll go around each panelist on this, is if there was one impact you'd like the SQE to have, what would that be? Does anyone want to go first, or I'll be the chair who just picks on someone if not? So Finn, you're the bravest of us, so you go first.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm certainly happy to give a first response. So I think that one of the things that we'd like to see is to have the SQE really opening up the career of law to a more diverse pool of people. And I think that's been reflected in a lot of the comments we've heard today from other panelists, that actually that diversity goal would be a fantastic outcome of SQE. From the law firm perspective, there's obviously been a lot of work that's been going on around recruiting and retaining more diverse talent. And I think all the members of the City Consortium that we form part of have that goal of making sure that future joiners are coming to firms ready for their roles and can really maximise their potential to make a success out of their careers. And having that realised for all aspiring solicitors, regardless of their background or their route into law, would be a fantastic outcome. So that's what I think would be a great result to see.
Thank you, Finn. Elizabeth, could I come to you next, if that's okay?
Yes, absolutely. So I think it'll come as no surprise that equality and diversity would be the main impact that I would like to see the SQE actually have. And linked in with that, and in reference to some of the points that Carl's made earlier, that reduction of cost. That one of the main barriers was cost upon cost upon cost, the risk and the gamble. And by all of these fantastic innovative solutions that we've been hearing about today, it seems to me that we're at the beginning of that pathway to ensuring that students are able to take advantage of pathways where the cost has genuinely been reduced and not just supplanted by an equivalent product, albeit via a different name, to really welcome and ensure that these are equal opportunities for everybody at whatever time is best for them to study and in whatever way it is best for them to study. So that's what I would like to see it achieve.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Really important points there. Shall we move on to you, Chris?
Yeah, totally agree with the diversity outcome, and that's going to be one of the themes in our first Future of Legal Practice talk in January next year. So do have a look at that. I think the other point that I'd like to make about SQE is that I think I'd like it to be a catalyst for a real rethink and refreshed look at how we train and educate lawyers. And one of the themes from today's session has been around the additional skill sets in terms of things like legal technology, which are required for future practice. And I think that the SQE will play a fundamental role in being that threshold test for the core legal knowledge and skills. But I think it offers an opportunity for educators and training providers to think more widely about the package of skills and knowledge that is needed for practice.
Thank you, Chris. Dimitrios.
Yes, and a natural follow-up to what Chris was saying there. I would like to see the SQE instill new synergies in the academy to break down barriers that are totally unnecessary between the legal profession and academia. For both the research-led institutions and others who have already paid sufficient attention to practice. I think that will lead to potential cultural revolution in the same way that the emphasis on the student experience through the National Student Survey a few years ago has done so. It will create new opportunities, and students will be the beneficiaries of this new dialogue between the academy and the profession.
Well, I didn't expect one of the answers to involve cultural revolution, Dimitrios. So but that's good to hear, and it sounds exciting. So, Gun, shall we move on to you next?
I think I'm going to echo what everyone else has said already in terms of I hope that we'll see greater accessibility into the sector where we haven't probably had that compared to other professional services. So from a D&I perspective, I hope that the SQE will bring more of an equal level playing field. So that's what I'm very hopeful of, and also kind of create reduction of costs for students. So that's, I think, a positive for us. I hope that does come through.
Thank you, Gun. And Carl, I've given you the raw deal of having to try and say something original after 5 other people have all said something. So there's a challenge for you there.
Thank you very much. Well, I've spent 3 decades in this profession of vocational legal education, and I think we're at a point of revolution here. I think that innovation is going to come from the new entrants in the market as well. So there'll be a lot of change, and the output from this will be greater social justice. I've got an amazing team out here at Arden University who thrive on that. And I think that we will see greater opportunity, greater equality, lower cost routes in, less time that needs to be devoted, and those hidden barriers to entry will start to fall.
Well, what a note to finish on, Carl, and I'm pleased that you're supporting Dimitrios's revolution as well. So we're really getting momentum there. I think this has been a really fascinating session, and one thing I would say is actually you can watch the equivalent of this session last year on YouTube. This one will be available on YouTube. It will be really interesting to run this session almost every year and see how the conversation's evolving, see whether Carl's sort of call to arms at the end there actually comes to pass, because obviously the proof will be in the pudding, and that's one of the reasons it's so important that we at the SRA will be monitoring and evaluating the impacts of the SQE and how the training market responds over the coming years to see whether these benefits are being realised. But I thought that was a great session. I want to give a virtual round of applause, and I'm sure everyone's whooping in their living rooms and offices at the moment for all our speakers there and the time they've given. The next session we're going to be running is starting at 1:10. That's on the assessment specifications and the functioning legal knowledge. Please use the new YouTube link to log into that. Again, if you're bowing out now from the event, please click on the link below and fill in the evaluation and tell the speakers how good they were and any areas we can improve. I'm sure that's one for the chair. So otherwise, thank you for everyone joining us, and hopefully see you for the next session.